The place you live in is not officially yours, but you are there every day. You clean it, organize it, get used to it. You shape your life around it. You didn't lay the pipes in your street. You didn't choose which power plant produces your electricity. The internet, transportation, the healthcare system, and the value of money are not things you control. Yet every month you pay for all of them. Sometimes these payments seem small, sometimes they feel like just part of normal life, and sometimes they arrive all at once, add up to a large amount, and weigh heavily on you. Rent, bills, credit cards, installments, taxes, mandatory expenses. These payments are not luxuries. They are the components of a survival package. And what's interesting is this: to stay inside this package, you must constantly remain eligible. As long as you can pay, you exist. When you can't, the system makes one thing very clear: your access can be restricted. At that point, a question naturally arises. Is this really freedom? Or is it simply a more polite form of dependence? The word feudalism sounds frightening. That's why many people are uncomfortable with this comparison. You're exaggerating, they say. No one is chaining anyone. They're partly right. There are no chains. But feudalism was never defined by chains. It was defined by dependence. In the Middle Ages, peasants were dependent on land because there was no alternative. Leaving the land meant abandoning survival itself. Today, no one physically restrains you in one place. But the system does something subtler. It makes alternatives more expensive with each passing day. You're free to leave, but can you? Can you start over? Can you afford the risk of making a mistake? This is where the difference becomes clear. The feudal system did not survive through constant violence and pressure. It endured largely through habit. People accepted it and built their lives around it because it was predictable. You knew what you would gain and what you would lose. Risk was limited. In today's world, the story is the opposite. Everything is possible. You can do anything. If you work hard, you'll rise. This narrative became so powerful that people began questioning themselves instead of the system. If something goes wrong, the problem must be me. History, however, tells a different story. Feudalism didn't exist because people didn't work hard enough. It existed because ownership was concentrated in the hands of a few. The Industrial Revolution was different precisely because it temporarily spread ownership. That period was short but impactful. People believed effort would be rewarded. Buying a home with a salary was possible. One job could support a family. Planning for the future made sense, but it didn't last, because the underlying logic of the system never changed. Ownership remained the strongest force, only its form shifted. Fields were replaced by housing. Fields were replaced by shares. Guilds gave way to corporations. Landowners were replaced by balance sheets. And throughout this transition, no one said, "We're moving backward." Because we weren't moving backward, we were changing. The quietest part of this transformation was prices. Housing costs rose, but it is called market reality. Education became more expensive and was labeled an investment. Healthcare costs grew and were justified as sustainability. None of these were presented as necessities. They were framed as choices. But for something to be a choice, it must be accessible. People worked, longer hours, more flexible conditions, less security. Yet many still felt stuck in place, because even when incomes rose, the cost of living rose faster. Debt filled the gap. Debt is one of the most effective tools of the modern system because it doesn't feel like pressure, it feels like hope. Buy now, pay later. It sounds like confidence in the future, but debt restricts the future. It binds labor that hasn't yet been earned. It locks you into past prices. This is the modern version of feudal obligation. Back then, labor was tied to land. Today, it's tied to contracts. The outcome is the same. The space to move narrows, and the system is very good at making this dependence invisible. Everyone is free. Everyone has chosen. So responsibility is placed on the individual. That's why people don't get angry. They feel ashamed. They don't rebel. They try to fix themselves. And that makes the system resilient. In moments of crisis, this structure becomes even clearer. During major shocks, the first things protected are not people, but assets. Markets are stabilized. Property is secured. Because the stability of the system depends on the stability of ownership. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a matter of priorities. The system decides what is essential according to its own logic, and in that logic, ownership sits at the center. The uncertainty many people feel today comes from here. People find themselves thinking, I'm not doing anything wrong, but I still don't feel safe. That matters. Because this isn't an individual failure, it's a structural signal. The link between work and security has weakened. Security increasingly requires ownership, but ownership is reaching fewer and fewer people. Feudalism didn't collapse because people were unhappy. It collapsed because people saw alternatives. When ownership spread, dependence became unnecessary. When ownership narrows again, dependence returns, quietly, politely, as if it were normal. So this isn't a doomsday story. It's an invitation to think, to ask a simple question. What do we really mean by freedom? If freedom means living with the constant risk of losing access, how free is it? If security requires endless payments, how stable is it? If most people carry the risk but never share in the gains, how sustainable is that? History shows us this. Power doesn't disappear. It reshapes itself. It adopts new language, but it keeps its old logic. Feudalism was never about castles, it was about ownership. And when ownership contracts, the results tend to repeat. What we're experiencing today isn't a direct copy of the past. It's an echo. Quieter, more refined, more normal. And that may be the most dangerous part of all.